Before cancer, I was a Penn State graduate, a Duquesne graduate, a teacher, a daughter, a girlfriend, a sister, a dog mama, a marathoner, a half marathoner, runner in general, Olympic weightlifter, bodybuilder, um, personal trainer, very happy and a family-oriented person. I was having vision blackouts. It would happen in one eye and then the other eye. It happened 4 times before I ended up going to the ER. So one of the last times that happened, my boyfriend Brandon and I were up at Monterey Bay, and it happened, and we almost went to the ER, but I just said one more time. So when it did happen the 4th time, I was with my mom. My mom and I had gone to the ER, and they took blood and they did an MRI of my brain because they actually were testing for MS. They said my brain was fine, but my blood was not. And so that's when they said, they said your white blood count was 67, which is indicative of leukemia. The crazy thing is, before my blood work came back, my mom and I almost joked, and because we were texting my Aunt Wendy, and we said, what if it's the L word? Because my uncle, who was my mom's little brother, had leukemia and had a transplant and passed away at the age of 31. I was 30 when I got diagnosed. So we lightheartedly said, what if it's the L word? And right shortly after that is when the doctor came in and said leukemia. I guess thinking about Uncle Charlie, and I was too young to know exactly what he went through, but I just knew that he was sick and that he passed away because of leukemia. I think the hardest thing was to be able to say the word cancer at the time. I texted a few friends and my brother, and when somebody called me, saying it over the phone made me break down. I was okay texting it. I was there with my mom. I felt fine, so I don't think I knew the enormous mountain that I was about to climb. For some reason, I didn't think I'm going to die at first. Yeah, most of my friends in the cancer community have thought that, but for some reason, I just wondered more about the quality of my life rather than the quantity. Able to retrieve 10 eggs, which ultimately is 5 eggs and 3 embryos. So I do have all those little embryos and eggs in a freezer in Pittsburgh somewhere. So I was definitely scared to stop the chemo treatment for 2 weeks prior to doing the egg retrieval medicines, but I trusted my doctor, and I knew that I would probably regret it if I wouldn't go through with retrieving the eggs prior to damaging them forever and not having that chance. I knew that a transplant was a major medical procedure, and it would change the way I lived, but it just impossible to know to what extent. And so I spent most of the 1.5 years researching and trying to connect with other cancer patients and survivors to find out the best course of action for me, because I have the most time to research me. So I tried to find a method that didn't involve a transplant that would be reassuring for preventing relapse, but ultimately I agreed with Dr. M that a transplant was the best course of action to not live with like this chip on my shoulder of whether or not cancer was going to come back. Strategy for cancer life as a cancer patient was just to kind of research, but then bring it to the expert that Dr. M was and find out what her thoughts are on if this is good for me. Because I'm not an expert and I don't claim to be, but I can read a research paper and understand whether or not that could be an option. So I'm so thankful that Dr. M viewed me as somebody with a voice and a mind and not just a diagnosis. So diagnosis equals treatment plus symptom management. She never did that to me. So without that, I just think my treatment situation was perfect because of that, because she allowed me to feel like we were all involved in defeating cancer. I would say that Dr. M at the beginning didn't give me all of the like nitty-gritty details of my treatment plan, but that's because she didn't know me as a patient yet. So I remember at the beginning of our treatment, I emailed her this long email of all the ways that I was not thrilled with my care. And I said, this specific example made me really upset. This specific example didn't make me feel seen. And she's amazing because she called me. She's like, I'm busy, but I can call you tomorrow or something like, she said like, I'm out of town, something like that. I'll call you tomorrow. And she addressed every single concern on that email. Transplant was the actual transplant day, as you might know, is just a gravity infusion, so nothing too exciting. But soon after, it was rough. I had allergic reactions. I was very sick. I struggled in the bathroom. I threw up. What's funny is throughout my entire cancer process, I tutored virtually. So during transplant, I would have my laptop and I'd be tutoring, and then I'd have to mute and throw up and then tutor because she's only in elementary school. So she knew I was sick in the hospital, but we never used the word cancer or anything. She might have been able to handle it, she might not, but just, yeah, I didn't want to ever let her have to go through school without tutoring. So our response is to gloss over the negatives and move forward. It's good for keeping composure, but maybe not for healing. I still love exercise. I'm actually running a half marathon in September for NMDP for the ones who found me my donor match. I'm raising money for them, and it's at Disneyland in California, and exercise really brings me joy, and I'm so grateful to be able to move my body. My dogs, my family, I have a lot to be thankful for. I'm grateful that my biggest complaint is that my hair is so dark and that my eyelashes are short. Those are my biggest complaints right now, which I couldn't be happier. I don't know that I would be in as good of a health situation as I am without Hillman and the doctors and the support, the PAs, the NPs, the nurses there. The doctors and nurses and APPs at Hillman, they understand not only empathy and care and love for their patients, but also they're very educated and knowledgeable about safe practices and keeping. Sterile technique has been a huge thing for me on just feeling safe. So as a patient, when you're not able to give yourself the treatment, I just feel like I would choose Hillman over and over again because I'm safe in their hands. I cannot say that I would go anywhere else. So I guess it's a little bit humbling that I could receive such an award with such magnitude as a James Conner named award. James Conner was great on the Steelers, and now he's on my boyfriend's team, the Cardinals. And so we're a big James Conner household now. Yeah, so if I can be even close to the same amount of honor that's received for James Conner, then that makes me feel pretty great. So while I was in the hospital for transplant, my dad was also in the hospital at a different hospital, and he went in for a kidney stone, and the kidney stone procedure went wrong. They did a small procedure to try to blast the stones, and he ended up septic. So my poor mom had to go to the hospital to see me, the hospital to see my dad, and at one point my brother had to go to the ER, all in the same month. And after transplant, after the month of transplant, I got out of the hospital, and my dad was out of the hospital, but he was in rehab facilities. And so after transplant, you don't have an immune system. So I would go stand outside the window and just say hi or call him on the phone, and he'd be on the other side. And so once I felt like it was safe enough, I would visit with him, and we would sit outside and just have drinks or dinner together. And we would go to clinic at Hillman twice a week, and my mom and I were driving down there on July 17th, and my mom just decided, I need to call him, her husband, my dad. And they didn't answer where he was. And shortly after, the nurse or the hospice, I messed up the story, but no, they ended up having to put him in hospice. So my mom will tell the story better, but to be honest, he wasn't cared for very well, and he got really bad bed sores, and so they had to put him in hospice in July. And then that day on July 17th, they called my mom back and said that he had passed. And so my mom left me because I had to stay at clinic and just to drive up to see him. And so my mom, who was working full-time caregiver to me, and we were trying to also visit my dad, had to plan a funeral and go to my dad's funeral, and just...
Let's talk.
My parents and I get along really well. So, I mean, my dad would cook dinner every night, and we would just, I don't know, hang out, watch TV, or go for walks. So spending time with my parents was a great reason to stay in Pittsburgh on top of the type of care that I was getting. And so I had to realize that it's okay to feel two emotions at once. It's okay to be excited and happy that I don't have cancer, and be absolutely devastated that I lost one of the biggest role models in my life. He's the reason I was a runner. He was a marathoner. He's the reason I like to cook. He was so good at baking. So, yeah. It just was like salt to the wound, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anywhere I ever lived, he followed me, like just to visit. And I lived in South Korea, Texas, South Carolina. Like, anywhere I ever lived, he was like, I'll come see you. So, yeah.